And the two twins are there the whole time, and they're identical. Military crew cut the whole thing. It's creepy. And then they say, sir, we're sorry, but we're going to have to blindfold you. And he's very upset about being blindfolded, but he allows them to do it. They go into a helicopter, then they land, and they take him to a facility. He's blindfolded the whole time. He's deep underground into an elevator. He comes out, blindfold is off, and he's face-to-face with Axelrod. He spends a week there, and he does remote viewing. And Axelrod asks him, well, what do you know about the moon? This is the first time Ingo Swann's thought about the moon. He says, well, I don't know. I know the moon's there. That's about it. So Axelrod has him doing remote viewing of the moon, and this is where Ingo said he saw people, beings, structures, and all of this. And then the beings noticed him remote viewing them. He got very upset. And then he had all these other experiences. He has these series of interactions with very human-looking beings who he is made to understand are not human, like a woman in the supermarket, kind of a famous story. This voluptuous, beautiful woman, and he gets close enough to her, and he gets terrified because he realizes that she's not human. And then he looks in the supermarket, and there are the twins. You know, when I talk to individuals who had interactions with these other intelligences, most of them have strong psychic capabilities in one way or another. I think there's a connection.
You told that very well, and then the book climaxes with that frightening situation at that lake and the forest.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Okay, but there's something really important, and even in some ways the most fascinating part of Ingo's perception of himself in remote viewing. He did over and over say, I'm not a psychic. This is science. We are matter in electromagnetic fields. This is what Ingo would say. He would say, I was able to access information in electromagnetic field. And I've always thought about that a great deal because Ingo was so insistent that no one think of him as a psychic, never used the word. And when the person who is gifted in whatever the interaction with the universe is, as Ingo Swann, what would the general denominator be to all the rest of us? Because he would say, I can teach you to remote view at least a little bit. It depends on how much you do.
Yeah, he taught many people.
Yeah, and what would this process be of interaction between the matter container and our mind, and we'll say the cosmos, which comes down to the air, the electromagnetic field, the matter world around us. And that, to me, was a legacy from him to me, wondering about how remote viewing could relate to now what is being discussed all the time in physics.
Exactly.
The entangling of electrons, the idea of entangling photons, and that there might be truly, from Ingo Swann to this whole huge field that we're all struggling to cut through, this Gordian knot, that the truth is, whether it's Homo sapien on Earth or a blonde on Epsilon Eridani or a gray on Zeta Reticuli or something at billions of more light years away, that there is an entangling of the entire fabric of this universe in which it is related to resonance in magnetic fields, resonance in sound frequency is the key, and that we are just beginning to step through the door for the very first time with physics and our curiosity. What is our individual entanglement with the entire cosmos, not only in life, but at the moment of death, and that death is not the end of anything, but is a transition to another one of these frequencies in another dimension. I put a big question mark because it seems to me that everything is headed toward that question.
I think that's beautifully put. I have felt for years that remote viewing, when you really try to understand it, I mean, think about this. These are individuals who can see things or detect things not only across space, but across what we would call time. And so, you ask, how is it possible in this universe? What does it say about the structure of reality that a person can do that? And to me, the only conclusion is that the conventional science, physics that we are taught are woefully inadequate to be able to explain just what people like Ingo Swann and others, like Joe McMoneagle and Lynn Buchanan and others, have been able to demonstrate over and over, and not famous people can do. There's something going on there, and I have come to agree with you in this now 12, 15, 20-year journey of my own in this field, that consciousness is a critical component in the structure of our universe. I would not have said this 15 years ago, I can tell you, and I say it now, that it is thought, consciousness. Somehow, I don't pretend that I've got the full answer on this, but it's the key. It's the key to so much of what we do here. And I think these other beings that are interacting with us here on planet Earth, they know this. And I think that they have a particular interest in certain individuals, very likely individuals who may have key abilities in that area.
It is highly possible, maybe probable, that there are entities, people, combinations of ETs and humans now on the moon, on Mars, working out to have a place to go to in a bridge from whatever happens on this dear planet. God. And that we are standing at what I think is absolutely the most critical, feels more precarious than anything I can remember, where it's either going to go this path in which there's going to be launches of nuclear weapons for reasons that range everything from ego to territoriality. And then there is the possibility that if we can get past this desire on some people to launch nuclear missiles and avoid that we might actually begin to move as a whole planet forward into a whole new doorway in which the other side will be other life in this universe. And then the big question is agendas, who, what, and why.
Yeah.
And I think that you, even though you've written after disclosure, the issue is there any sitting leader of any kind on this planet today that wants to be alive when the truth is told?
I think that's a great question. I have felt and I feel that disclosure is one of these things where it will never happen voluntarily. It will only be a forced event. And if the leadership that has control of the secret had its way, the secret would never, ever, ever come out.
What a upside-down idea to realize that we're on a planet where we'll call it the ancient power greed structure, would prefer a planet that is buried in lies in order to remain somewhat in control.
Yeah.
And that we would go forward through the rest of the 21st century to the 22nd and beyond with all of these lies kept in place as truth and realities. I can't believe that in this universe, if we are entangled, that this kind of manufactured, manipulated power, greed, lies would stay hold of this planet for the foreseeable future, which is what I've been told every leader on the planet would prefer. And the final irony is the breakaway civilization. The most fascinating email that I received was of an underground pyramid approximately 2 hours east of Unalakleet, Alaska. Here now is Bruce Pearson relating what his father told him. After the late April or early May 1978 U.S. Air Force helicopter trip to an underground pyramid site west of Mount McKinley in Alaska.
My father had related to me where he had been talking to these guys that came in to fuel up on their way out of Unalakleet on some parts delivery mission. I guess they hit it off, and he said, look, you're not scheduled, but I got a slot if you want to take a ride out with us and come on back. He assumed when he told my mom he was going to go on this flight with him that it was out to an early warning dew line installation. But when he got in the chopper, the guy said, no, this isn't dew line. He said, this is some weird installation. And then he said, well, what do you mean weird? He said, well, it's underground. And the co-pilot, he said, look, this is some generating facility or something that's underground. And he said, well, what's it, just a nuclear power plant? And he said, no, it's not nuclear. It's nothing we built. It's thousands of years old. It's cut stone like a pyramid. It's 150 feet below ground, and they can't figure out what the hell it is. So he said, look, this is all off the record. I'm not even supposed to know this, but this is what I was told, that this thing will put out enough power to power the whole North Slope, the whole state of Alaska, and he said this thing could power the entire country of Canada. That's how much juice it puts out, and they don't have a clue where it came from, and it's underground. But we got the duty to bring this thing out. He said, and I really don't have any idea why that fixed-wing aircraft is following us all the way out there. I guess in case we crash, they'll know where to send people to pick up the pieces. So they had 3 aluminum, stainless steel-looking cases. Like that said, they were beautiful cases. They were all machined.
What happened?
They flew out in a helicopter, and I believe it was a Huey, but they were escorted by a fixed-wing aircraft that never landed. And my dad said you could see them every once in a while. They're 1,000, 2,000 feet above them, just making S-curves, so they wouldn't run away from the chopper. They flew out about 2 hours east, my dad said, of Unalakleet.
Did your father ever detail exactly where he thought this place was 2 hours east from Unalakleet?
He said it was in the middle of nowhere, but he said they didn't change course throughout the whole flight. And it was, he said, pretty much due east of Unalakleet.
Okay.
When he landed, he was heavy. He said he was so heavy that when he sat down, the skids spread out. He flew enough in choppers. He said he knew the thing was working pretty hard the whole way out, and they were on fumes when they got out there. It took 6 guys to take them off. That's what he said. And I said, well, what did this place look like? He goes, there was the tundra, there was a blockhouse and a fuel dump and like a motor pool shed, a garage for vehicles. And he said they had a snowcat, and he could see a couple other vehicles. And then off to the side there was a couple of mine shaft elevators. And believe me, my father came from a coal mining family, so he certainly knew what a mining elevator looked like with the circular pulleys up top and the gantry and all that stuff. So he said there was a couple of these gantries sticking out of the tundra, and they all had elevated guardhouses on them, and they had electrical razor wire fence around them. And they said electrified fencing, do not approach or something. He said, man, there was a lot of firepower around there, and they didn't have 50 calibers on their Jeeps to shoot polar bears.
Right.
They had them trained on us when we landed. The fixed-wing aircraft kept circling overhead, and these guys all had black uniforms with no insignias on. So he said, I know they were military uniforms, but even the pilot said, I don't even know who these guys are with. Probably spooks is what he said, figuring they were CIA or whatever. But here's the creepy part. I said, so did you see cables coming out of the ground or anything? A transformer station or any of that? He goes, no, but he said, we got about 5 miles from the place, and the co-pilot said to me, now listen, things are going to get a little bizarre. We were told that all our instruments are going to go crappy, and we have to go VFR. And VFR is visual flight rules instead of instrument. So he said, don't panic. You're going to hear alarms going off maybe and all kinds of stuff, but we're just going to fly VFR. So sure enough, he said, all of a sudden, the major, who was the pilot, said, here we go, boys. My father, he was sitting in the back, and he looked over between the 2 seats, he said, and the entire radar screen went completely green. So all the trace went off the radar. All of a sudden, a couple red lights, alarms went for, generator power. An alarm went off. Horns are going. And the co-pilot said, don't worry, everything's under control. They took it off autopilot, and they were flying it manually and had visual contact for the ground. They're only 500 or 1,000 feet up, he said. But all the electronics went haywire. He said he could see the artificial horizon just flip-flopping. And he said the compass was spinning like 50 miles an hour, so there was no compass heading. Everything was bizarre. The lights were out, like they had lost their generators, and they were still flying, but they certainly weren't flying IFR in that aircraft. He must have had some power to it, whether it was running off batteries or whatever, but he said everything went haywire. And they landed. Nobody got out of the aircraft. 6 guys came in to pull these 3 cases off